Everyone. Welcome to this session on Generative Modeling Certification Program. So this is the second module of the certification program. And this is Amit Kumar. I am a AI intern with Cellstrat. So introduction to Cellstrat. Cellstrat is a leading artificial intelligence startup with focus in different areas like product development, course creation, and a lot of innovations. Right. So this is the whole course content as part of the certification program. The first series or the first module was on introduction to generative modeling, and today we'll be talking about generate faces with variational autoencoders. Okay, so starting off with module 2, which is generate faces with variational autoencoders. This is the content for today. First, we'll do a quick recap on generative modeling from module 1. Then we'll go through autoencoders, followed by introduction to variational autoencoders. We'll see a difference between a plain vanilla autoencoder and a variational autoencoder. Then we'll talk about the latent space, followed by variational inference, KL divergence, and some of the properties of variational inference, which is like elbow, evidence lower bound, and reparameterization trick. And we'll follow it up with a code demo. All right, so coming to a quick recap on generative modeling. So generative modeling is divided into two sections, which we see over here. One is explicit density, then the other is implicit density. Now, in case of explicit density, the distribution or the data is taken from the probability distribution, whereas in case of implicit density, we take few examples and we use that to generate further details. Like in the case of GAN, we take few images from a distribution and then we pass it through a generator and a discriminator network to generate the images, or in case of an image. But in case of explicit density, we explicitly have access to the whole probability distribution for the input source. So in explicit density, there are two types of densities, which is tractable and the other is approximate. Once we say tractable, it means that it can be computed, or computationally it's possible to calculate or these particular algorithms. Some of these are like NADE, Neural Auto-Regressive Density Estimator, Mask Auto-Regressive Density Estimator, Pixel RNN, CNN, change of variable models, and one of the example for that is nonlinear ICA. Now, this particular density is intractable. So since this is intractable, to make it tractable, we do some approximation. That's why this is known as approximate density. And we'll see this in variational autoencoders today, why we call this approximate density, or because of the intractable challenge. Next is Markov chain. And in implicit density, again, we discussed about GAN just now. Apart from this, we have something called GSN, which is gradient stochastic network. Okay. Coming to autoencoders. So autoencoders is an unsupervised artificial neural network that learns how to efficiently compress and encode data. And then from the encoded data, we reconstruct the data, or we reconstruct the image. So if we see over here, this is the original image that we pass to an encoder, which convolutes it into a compressed representation of low dimension. And then further it is upsampled and the image is reconstructed over here. So again, the encoder has some parameters, decoder has some parameters. Over here we have phi as the parameter for the encoder and psi as the parameter for the decoder. X over here is the input image, whereas F over here is the compressed representation. And so this is our encoder part, which is from X to F. The second is our decoder part, which is from F, our latent space, and then it goes up to reconstruction of the new image. So, and this is a loss function that we have over here, which is X minus. This is a reconstructed input, and again the same loss function is over here, but is just that this particular X dash, which is our reconstructed image, is been further expanded. It is in this form where again value of Z can be substituted over here. And it will ultimately become this. So basically we are substituting value. All of this is an X dash. We are just substituting value and enlarging it. Next thing is, once let's say this particular phase, if we are passing it through an autoencoder, we come up with a lot of latent features for that particular image. Like for in this example, we have smile, skin tone, gender, beard, glasses, hair color. These are the different features, and we can probably manipulate one of these features and then try to reconstruct it. So for example, smile, right? Let's say we change the value a bit, uh, increase the value a bit, and then reconstruct. We'll see that this particular image will of the person will be, I mean, the person will be smiling more in the reconstructed image. Same way we reduce the smile value over here, then the expression will change. So this is one of the advantages or one of the features supported by autoencoders. Now
I
coming
think
to
yeah, I hope the basic autoencoder is clear to the audience. If it is not, please send a question by chat and could repeat it briefly if needed. So, okay, so I guess we can assume the basic autoencoder is clear to the audience.
All right, so coming to the introduction to variational autoencoders. Now, variational autoencoders, if we see, the architecture remains the same, but there is a probabilistic spin. There's a question over here, like what is meant by density? Now, density in terms of probability density function, in that case, this is with respect to the probability distribution. In case of a continuous variable or a continuous data, we plot it in terms in the probability distribution, and we get the probability density function. The sum of the probability density function is equal to 1. So, so next is yeah, in terms of variational autoencoder, the difference is that we have a probabilistic encoder over here and we have a probabilistic decoder. Rest of the part, if we see, is same. We have an input coming from over here. It passes through an encoder, gets further convoluted into a lower dimensional space. Okay, there's a question over here. How do we know that the first feature corresponds to smile? Yeah, that's a good point. That is a bit difficult to know. Probably we can once we go through some of the topics, that will be much clearer. So let's just park that for a while. Okay, so yeah, what we see over here is that we have a particular distribution, probability distribution Q, Z given X, and mean of this particular distribution and sigma of this particular distribution, and this is how the latent variable value is calculated. I mean, this is just for intuition. We will, once we go through some of the topics like reparameterization trick and all, this will be clear, but just to have a look at it, we will be dealing this in great detail. So just to know
So the
that
main
this
difference from primary autoencoder is there you have discrete feature discovery happening in encoder and then reverse feature reconstruction happening in decoder. Now here, instead of discrete feature discovery in encoder and decoder, you are doing probabilistic distribution, basically sampling using mean and standard deviation. So like a Gaussian curve. So you are doing sampling across a probability distribution as opposed to discrete feature discovery. That smile thing was just a notional representation. It just meant you'll be operating of discrete feature. Here, instead of discrete feature, you will be operating off a probability distribution by sampling using this kind of Gaussian, selection.
Right. And the other point also being that these are continuous. Once we talk about probability distribution, this will be continuous value, unlike autoencoders, which are discrete. So that is one of the difference as well, which we will discuss. So this is one of the examples where this is the original image of a face, and then we are making some changes, and the person is smiling more, and here to the extent of laughing. Now the expression has changed, and it finally comes to something around sadness. So we are playing around with one particular or some particular latent features, and we are getting different expressions. Now, coming to the difference between autoencoders and variational autoencoders, we discussed that autoencoders works on the principle of discrete values. Let's look at these particular examples over here. We see that in this particular example, the kid is not smiling too much, rather it looks like a sad expression, and we can see that the value is actually less than zero. It's negative. Same way for Mona Lisa, it comes to zero. For this particular kid, it goes above, and this particular guy, it's more close to one. But in case of same thing, if it has to be represented in terms of variational autoencoders, it will be probability distributions like we have over here. And what is the difference? Fine, I mean, these are discrete and this is a probability distribution. The difference is that in autoencoder, since discrete values is used, there's no certainty that a point generated at, let's say, -2, 2 will be anyway related to another at -2.1, 2.1 in the coordinate system. Whereas since VAE works on continuous values represented as probability distribution function in a probability distribution, so the point or output generated at -2, 2 and -2.1 and 2.1 will be very related to each other. So that is the advantage over here. Okay, now coming to the latent space, now we are actually venturing into the loss function, but it's good for some intuition purpose. Uh, we will discuss about reconstruction loss, which we just went through. Then we'll go through KL divergence and a combination of both. Now, what happens as part of reconstruction loss? We would have seen that x minus x dash equation just a couple of slides back. So that was our original image minus the generated image, right? So that's what we are applying over here, which is a reconstruction loss. And this is an MNIST data set that it has been trained on, and the output or the cluster is provided on an MNIST data set with different colors representing different digits. What we see over here is that though there are clusters, but there is a lot of gap between clusters. Now, if I take this particular point, in this space, I take this particular point and try to reconstruct an image out of it, it may not give me a particular digit because it's coming from this gap which doesn't have any representation. So this is the disadvantage of reconstruction loss, where there's a lot of gaps in the clusters and may not give me an accurate or a correct digit once I generate a point. In terms of KL divergence, though the points are represented in the latent space, but it's not well clustered. If we see, everything is kind of jumbled up together. So, I mean, the issue is that if there's no cluster, it is very difficult to predict a particular digit that will be coming out. So that is the disadvantage that we see with respect to KL divergence. Though there is no gaps, but then there is no order as well. There's no clusters as well. Now, once we combine the reconstruction loss and KL divergence, we see that we get a very good distribution over here, where uh, just look at individual colors which represent individual digits. Like, it's actually uh, clustered very well, and then the gaps are also very less. So a combination of reconstruction and KL divergence is doing the trick and helping us come up with the right classification of digits. Okay, there's a question over here. Does that mean that VAE produces more smooth output? It produces more smooth output, but the thing is, like, with respect to what? I mean, are we discussing with, okay, you mean with respect to autoencoders? Yeah, definitely it does. Definitely it does. And apart from that, there's more variation as well that we can come up with in terms of images with respect to variational autoencoders, uh, apart from autoencoders. That is because of the probabilistic distribution that we are using instead of discrete values in case of autoencoders. So coming to the next topic, which is variational inference. Now, this is the most important topic in with respect to variational autoencoders, and this is the reason why actually we are able to perform variational autoencoder operations. So this VI or variational inference is a technique to approximate complex distribution. Now, this is a normal naive Bayes theorem that we see over here. This part over here is the posterior distribution. This is the likelihood. This is the prior, and this is the evidence. Now, the problem over here is that this particular part, which is P of X, probability of X, is actually intractable. Calculating it is not possible. Why? Because this actually is the multiple integration of with respect to all the features that are there in the latent vector or latent space. So for example, if we go back to this particular example, what we saw over here, there are 6 latent features or attributes, right? So P of X has to be calculated with respect to all integration of it has to be calculated, like multiple integration has to be done with respect to P of X. So we seeing that it's such difficult with respect to just 6 features. So once the number of dimensions, number of features increases, it definitely goes more towards becoming intractable. Now, so this is a challenge with respect to variational autoencoder. Now, how to solve this? In order to solve this, okay, before that, since this P of X is intractable, so this makes our posterior distribution also intractable. Now, the solution is to come up with another distribution, or let's say assign a distribution, and then try to approximate this particular posterior distribution or true distribution with respect to our new assigned distribution. That distribution, the new assigned distribution, we can call it Q, and that is being created in order to approximate our posterior distribution. And this particular distribution, which is Q, is known as our variational distribution. We can probably look at this figure over here. We see that our true distribution or posterior distribution is Pz given X. So this blue area is being defined by it, whereas our Qz, which is our variational distribution, it's more like a Gaussian distribution, and it's trying to approximate the area covered by the true posterior or true distribution. Now, coming to Kullback-Leibler divergence. Now, the first question could be like, why KL divergence? It's just because we introduced one more distribution over here, right, which needs to approximate our posterior, which is actually QZ of X. And since we say that it should approximate, that means that the gap or this particular distribution, which is Q C given X, should map this particular distribution. And how do we know that this will map this? It's by finding the difference. And how do we find the difference? It's by taking Kullback-Leibler divergence. So what does Kullback-Leibler divergence do, or what does scale divergence do? It's a measure that helps us to find a difference between two probability distribution. So that's why we are applying it over here. But this is the normal equation for a KL divergence, and we are applying a normal log A minus B. And over here now we apply the naive Bayes. Once we apply the naive Bayes, again normal log operations that we are doing, we're just expanding in terms of log operation. So this is what we are getting. And there's a question here. Just give me one second. All right. So moving on to the next slide. I think it was just a comment, not a question. Next is evidence lower bound. So what is evidence lower bound? Now, this is our log likelihood. Now, basically the purpose of evidence lower bound or variational lower bound is to optimize variational autoencoders. Again, what that means. So this is our log likelihood, and with respect to expectation of the approximate distribution that we have, we can probably put it like this, and then uh, this is our joint probability with respect to this is a conditional probability with respect to p theta x that we have given. Now over here we are just multiplying our approximate distribution, which is q phi z given x in both sides, right? And then this particular part, right, this particular part becomes our elbow, which is evidence lower bound, and this particular part, which is the approximate distribution divided by the true posterior, becomes our KL divergence. Now, one thing to note over here is that KL divergence will always be greater than equal to 0. It will be 0 when our approximate and our true posterior matches each other, but it can never be negative. If there's a difference, it will be more than 0. So again, why I'm discussing this is because there's not much opportunity over here to optimize it. Again, when I say optimize it, basically I'm looking for something, some value less than 0, which is not possible over here. So the only thing left over here which can be optimized is this part, and that's why this is called a lower bound of the log likelihood. Again, if we look into this particular equation, uh, so it's this equation itself rearranged a bit. We have brought this thing into the RHS, and log p of theta x has gone into LHS, and so the significance of this is that, let's say if the KL divergence is increasing, that will reduce my evidence lower bound, and if the KL divergence is reducing, that will increase my evidence lower bound. So evidence lower bound and KL divergence are inversely proportional to each other. So whatever be the case, the evidence lower bound will be less than equal to our log likelihood. And
So I think, yeah, I got the point that they are inversely proportional because they are being added. They are being added. So since you want to maximize log p theta x, so since you want to maximize, if DKL goes down, then elbow goes up and vice versa. So they are inversely proportional. But but what is the intuition of elbow then? Elbow will be when DKL has to be minimized or maximized. DKL has to be maximized, so elbow is being minimized. So what does that imply?
DKL is being the intent is to minimize DKL and maximize our lower variational bound. So in that case,
So
what can
elbow has
happen
to
is
go up, right? Elbow
elbow
has
has
to
to
go
go
up.
up. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So that would mean if elbow has to go up, then you are saying p theta xz divided by q phi has to go up. So what is the intuition that leads to? I'm trying to understand. If elbow has to go up, what would that mean? Or it just means that it sets a lower boundary.
Yeah, it sets a lower boundary, but then now the lower boundary is being increased since we are maximizing
Hmm.
so yeah, the intuition behind this is something that because now if we go back to this particular image, yeah,
Hmm.
so we have theta and we have, so if the lower bound is increasing over here. Mm. Okay, I think we can come back to that's a very valid question. I can probably come back to that later
That's
in the.
fine. That's fine.
All right. So okay, so this one is the prior distribution. Now, prior distribution means the hidden variable for our observed input, which is x. So, and prior distribution may not be a Gaussian over here. It's a hidden variable actually. So in this case, this is the decoder part where let's say z is given and we are trying to find x given z. Yeah, this is our probability distribution we are trying to find. This is the decoder part, but yeah, first would be the encoder part, that is which is x is given, and then we are trying to find out z. And these are the parameters which are actually for encoder it is phi, and for decoder it is theta. So our whole intention is to find an optimal value for this phi and theta, and the more optimal value we'll find, the more this figure will be more tightly coupled, we can say, based on the values of phi and theta. Again, there'll be multiple iterations, and this goes back to the principle of back propagation, which we'll discuss as in the next slide. Right. So coming to back propagation, now what we see over here is that this is the original form where, let's say, this is a function, this is our latent variable, and this is our observed variable, our input variable. Now back propagation would happen over here, but there is a challenge over here. Z or Z is a random variable, and back propagation cannot happen through random variable. We need a deterministic variable over here in order for the back propagation to function. So that is where so this is a challenge. So what is the solution? The solution is reparameterization trick. What happens over here is that this randomness is moved out. This particular variable that we see is called an epsilon, which belongs to a distribution which has zero mean and unit variance. And so this is the formula, this is the equation how we calculate the value of z in this case. Again, if I go back here, this is what we see over here. This is mu plus sigma into epsilon. So this is what's happening. So again, so now since this has become deterministic, since we have moved the randomness element out, so now we can back propagate easily. The thing is, so this is on a graphical model perspective, but even if we look at the equation perspective, so this particular loss function, for doing back propagation, we will differentiate it with respect to theta, and will differentiate it with respect to phi. With differentiation with respect to theta is fine, it will work okay. With differentiation with respect to phi will be a problem, because there's a principle of expectation that will come. So let me go over here. So what we see, this particular equation, what we see is that there's an expectation over here, and all right, let's check this one. So there is a delta phi, and there's an expectation over here, and this is the function. Now the thing is, we had to move this particular differentiation or delta phi inside this, but that will not happen, because it will give us the gradients value will be too high, the variance will be too high, so this thing will not work. Moving this particular delta phi inside this expectation is a problem, this is a challenge. So how this could be addressed is, this particular we have f function of f of z over here. Z can be assigned a value. This is a transformation differentiator. So we can put a epsilon and x over here. Epsilon comes from a normal distribution, and once we put this value for z, now we can move this particular expression, which is our phi, inside. So since we are doing that, this is basically we are doing a reparameterization. We are moving uh, phi from outside the expectation to inside the expectation so that it can be computed or calculated. We can probably see something interesting we can see over here, which is in the original form, which is this. We cannot differentiate f with respect to phi because we cannot directly backpropagate gradients through random variable z. We can externalize the randomness in z by reparameterizing the variable as a deterministic and differentiable function of phi x and a newly introduced random and a variable epsilon, which comes from a normal distribution. This allows us to backpropagate through z and compute gradients, which is delta phi x. So this is our reparameterization trick. Basically, it is a solution for backpropagation, which would not happen because of our random values or values as part of latent variables. And this reparameterization trick helps us to make z deterministic. And once this is deterministic, the backpropagation can flow through this and update values. Okay, so coming to the code demo part, this is for phase generation. Now this is our encoder part. It has 4 convolutional networks, and each of this convolutional network has activation function, leaky ReLU. Then we are flattening, and we have the bottleneck part of the hidden variables we have over here, the fully connected ones. And then we are upsampling or reconstructing using decoder. That also has our has 4 convolutional transpose layers. So yeah, this is the output that we'll see. This is in a GIF format. So we can see the variance that's happening with respect to phase. Now coming to the code demo part, okay, we have a question here. Why are the images all blurry? Yeah, even I mean the input image itself is blurry actually. I tried with, I mean, I wanted to try with some clear images that didn't happen. So I believe it's because of the input image being blurry. But again, I have also seen different examples, and what I see is that in most of the cases I'm seeing that with respect to variational autoencoders, the output images are blurry. But again, this is just based upon what I've seen, maybe just a few examples or few codes that are there out in Colab or things like that. So I cannot answer that for sure that that is the reason if it has to do anything with the with variational autoencoders. But in my case, definitely the input image itself is blurry. So this is a PyTorch implementation that we see over here. So we are passing the images and we are passing the model as well. So we have the model and we'll be loading it. But these are the features that we have for as part of our latent attributes. And this is the model that has been defined, which we just discussed in the PPT. Over here, we are loading the model conditional VAPT. All right, so let's just look at one example over here that has been generated. And then we try with all the test images. Again, this has been made into a zip file, which we just saw. but individual ones we can see over here. So the blurry part is a good question. This is something that we can probably I can try to figure out. Uh, so going back to the PPT. So these are the summary or key takeaways where variational autoencoders is an extension of autoencoder having encoder and decoder layers. The only difference is that there's a probabilistic spin over here where the encoder and decoder have a probability distribution. Variational inference helps to make P of x tractable. So this is in a case where P of x has multiple dimensions because uh, in case of P of x, we have to calculate multiple integrals with respect to all the latent features as part of the latent space. So that's why it becomes intractable. Evidence lower bound, also known as variational bound. This is used to optimize. We discussed that KL divergence cannot be optimized further because uh, if two distributions are matching, then KL divergence will be 0. Otherwise, it will be more than 1. So there's not much scope of optimizing it, but evidence lower bound can be further optimized. And so that's what has been displayed over here. Okay, so reparameterization trick is used for backpropagation. We are not able to do backpropagation in the original form because there is a latent variable or a random variable in between, which is C. Now, we are moving the random variable out of the equation using reparameterization so that backpropagation can happen. So this is what we discussed. These are the references that we have or that has been considered in preparing this presentation. Okay, thank you. By this, we come to an end of module 2.
Okay, any other questions, audience? So, Amit, have you checked the open questions?
Yes, we just let me just quickly go through them if there is anything pending. Okay, one. Can you please explain the interpretation behind the formula in the RHS? So this was one of the questions. Let me. I believe. Okay. Can you please further let me know which equation
No,
this
I
is
think
with
it was in
respect
the
to?
prior slide, not this one, 2 slides back. Yeah, here.
Okay. This one is. So are we talking about this particular equation?
Yeah, just explanation of this algo.
Okay. So this is basically two distributions, right? Which we are trying to find out the difference between them. We have applied a log operation over here, and this is log a divided by b, which is equal to log a minus b. And over here, we know the Naive Bayes theorem, right? If I go back here, this is the Naive Bayes theorem, right? So I'm just applying that over here, and then it's normal log operations. So this would be a minus, let's say minus, if this is a, b, and c, then this is minus a. uh, Again, this would be, this is into, this would be a plus, but because there's a minus, so that's why we have a minus over here, which is minus log p. And this would be a minus because it's division, but because we have a minus, this will be a plus over here, which is log p. So this is a normal log operations that's happening. More important part is this one, because everything is being derived from that. Nothing new is being added. It's just that over here we are putting the Naive Bayes substitution and log operations.
So KL divergence is tracking the difference between two probability distributions Q of Z and P of Z. So we are
Yeah.
is this the reconstructed distribution Q of Z? Is it the
Q
difference
of Z.
between the original probability distribution and the reconstructed distribution?
No, because this part is just the encoder part. What you're talking about is actually the end result or the output, which comes after decoder.
Okay. So what is Q versus P?
So P over here is, or P Z of X over here is the latent hidden variable for Z, whereas Q Z of X over here is a new distribution, and Z could be a Gaussian distribution over here. But PZ that we see over here is not a Gaussian distribution. This is the hidden variable for our X, which is our observed variable.
Now, one thing I might have missed before, how does P become Q? Maybe you go back to the previous diagram of the
Sure.
VIE autoencoder. So how does P become Q?
In the sense, this is you're talking about this particular equation or this piece of Z.
No, what is the relation between P and Q?
The relation between them is that Q is something that we are assigning so that it can map P. So Q is the learned distribution with respect to P. We cannot directly approximate.
Okay.
So this is a challenge over here, that we have to approximate this particular posterior, but we cannot directly approximate this. Rather, we can have one particular distribution that will learn this distribution. At the same time, it will do an approximation so that this problem of intractability can be solved.
Okay. So Q is an approximation of P, huh?
Correct. Q is an approximation, and it's
Okay.
basically a Gaussian distribution assigned by given by us, which will help to learn the properties, parameters of the posterior distribution, yet not being intractable, being tractable.
Okay. And then you are using KL divergence to minimize the distance between P and Q.
Correct.
Okay. There are some other questions coming.
Okay. Vic, I'm facing some issue with the question section. Okay, now it's
Yeah,
fine.
you
Sorry.
can order them in chronological manner, so you can see the latest questions.
Yeah,
You
I
order
think
them in chronology received.
okay. So one question is, why Gaussian? So let's think of in this way. All right. Now we don't know what a data set would be like, right? Data set could be anything random. We want to learn a particular distribution. So where we would like to start with? Something could be less, just for example, something could be less than 0, something could be more than 0. Where should we stand so that our distance would be equal from anywhere? Like even if we get a negative value or a positive value, our distance will be equal from anywhere. It will be at the point 0, isn't it? So now if we look at this particular Gaussian distribution, right? Isn't this like that? Isn't this like, let's say we get a mean over here, right? Which is over here. This will be actually equidistant from any point, isn't it? So what is the intuition behind telling this is, this particular distribution can learn any distribution easily compared to any other kind of distribution. A Gaussian distribution can learn any distribution very easily compared to any other distribution that we want to put. That is the reason why it is the most common distribution, because it's so easy to manipulate into any, in this case, our posterior distribution.
So this
Is
figure
it
nicely
symmetric?
indicates what we are trying to do. you have the blue PZ, but the blue PZ is not symmetrical Gaussian. So you are approximating it with QZ in green, which is more symmetrical Gaussian compared to PZ. Yet the distance or the KL divergence distance between PZ and QZ is being minimized at the same time. So we are approximating QZ instead of using the original PZ, which is not properly Gaussian.
Right. And I think the key word over here is symmetric. Yeah, that is the reason Gaussian is being used, because it's symmetric.
Right.
Okay, we already discussed most of the questions here. So what is meant by optimization here? Minimize or maximize? We are minimizing KL divergence and we are maximizing our evidence lower bound. So that is the optimization that we are working towards. Okay, I think these are the questions that I see. I don't see any new question apart from these.
Okay, audience, any other questions? Okay, so thanks a lot, Amit. So thank you, audience, for attending. And we look forward to next sessions by Amit already. And thank you, audience, for attending. Have a good day or good night, as the case may be, based on your time zone. And we'll see you later. Have a good night or good day.